Epic time travel adventure. It was New Year's Eve, 1972. The small town of Allen, Texas, sat quietly under the blanket of a cold winter night. Snowflakes drifted lazily from the sky, carpeting the ground in a soft white layer. The town was peaceful, as most of its residents were indoors, preparing for the celebrations. The sounds of distant laughter and the occasional pop of fireworks filled the air. The town seemed to exhale in a collective sigh of anticipation as midnight neared. Among them was Jonathan Wayne, a young man in his mid-20s, with dreams that far exceeded the small town life he led. He had always felt like an outsider here, like his heart yearned for something beyond the mundane. He worked at a local electrical store, repairing old equipment and helping out with various jobs around town. Yet, Jonathan's thoughts often wandered to faraway lands, ancient times, and distant futures. He was a dreamer, a man who longed for adventure, who fantasized about traveling not just across the globe but through the very fabric of time itself. That night, he stood outside his modest home, watching the fireworks sparkle against the cold night sky. The clock in his house struck midnight, its chimes filling the air, and in that moment, Jonathan felt a sudden surge of energy, a sharp jolt that made his skin tingle. His heart raced, his breath caught in his chest. For a brief moment, the world around him seemed to blur and distort, as if time itself had paused. A strange feeling washed over him, as if the very air had shifted. The stars above faded, the distant fireworks grew faint, and an overwhelming mist began to surround him. The ground beneath his feet seemed to tremble, and his body was overwhelmed with an odd sense of weightlessness. Jonathan blinked rapidly, trying to make sense of the sudden change, but before he could comprehend what was happening, the mist swallowed him whole. When it cleared, Jonathan found himself standing in a place unlike anything he had ever seen before. The cold was more intense here, the air thick with the scent of something ancient. The ground beneath his feet was uneven, paved with large stone slabs, and towering structures loomed around him, buildings with intricate carvings and architecture he couldn't quite place. It was a city, but it was unlike any city from his time or his world. The streets were silent, almost too quiet, and the sky above was dark and foreboding, devoid of stars. "Where am I?" Jonathan muttered, his voice trembling with uncertainty. He looked around, trying to make sense of the strange surroundings. The city was unlike anything he had ever imagined. The buildings were monumental, constructed from massive stone blocks, each one engraved with symbols he didn't recognize. The air was heavy, as if the weight of centuries pressed down upon him. His mind raced as he tried to make sense of it all. Could this be some kind of dream? Was he hallucinating? But the cold air biting at his skin, the sounds of distant murmurs that seemed to come from nowhere, all suggested otherwise. Before he could make another move, a figure stepped out from the shadows. It was a tall man, dressed in flowing robes that shimmered with strange metallic threads. His face was stern, but there was a knowing glint in his eyes, as if he had been expecting Jonathan. "You're not from here, are you?" the man asked in a deep, commanding voice. Jonathan froze, unable to respond. He tried to speak, but his words faltered. How could this man know he wasn't from here? And what was this place? The man's expression softened. "You've crossed the boundaries of time, haven't you? Welcome to Nimro." "Nimro?" Jonathan echoed. "Where is that?" "You are far from your own world," the man continued, his voice calm but laced with mystery. "You've traveled back in time, Jonathan. You've come to the ancient city of Nimro, and this is not the world you know." Jonathan blinked, trying to comprehend what the man was saying. "Time travel?" he whispered in disbelief. "But that's impossible." The man studied Jonathan for a long moment, as if weighing something in his mind. "It is not impossible, though it is rare. Few have experienced it, and fewer still have returned." He looked around, as if checking for anyone who might be listening. "You are here for a reason, Jonathan. There are things you must do. The fate of this world, of many worlds, depends on it." Still struggling to process what was happening, Jonathan asked, How did I get here? And why me?" "You did not arrive by chance," the man explained. "There are forces at work that transcend time and space. You were chosen. And now, you must embrace the path set before you. But first, you must understand this world." Jonathan was flooded with questions, but the man waved them aside. "Come. You will learn more as we go." With no other option but to follow, Jonathan walked alongside the stranger through the winding streets of Nimro. The city was vast, sprawling in every direction. The buildings towered above them, their surfaces decorated with symbols and hieroglyphs that Jonathan couldn't decipher. The people they passed looked at him curiously, their faces solemn but unbothered by his presence. Everything about Nimro felt ancient, and yet, there was something oddly familiar about it. The streets were paved with smooth stones, the air thick with mystery. The city seemed to hum with an energy Jonathan couldn't explain. It was as if the very fabric of the world here was woven from a different thread, one that existed outside the usual rules of reality. As they walked, the man, whose name was revealed to be Zephar, began to explain the history of Nimro and its people. They were an ancient civilization, far removed from the records of modern history. They had mastered the manipulation of time, creating devices and rituals that allowed them to move between eras. Nimro, Zephar explained, was the nexus, the central point where all of time converged. It was a city that existed outside of normal chronology, a place where the past, present, and future could overlap. Jonathan's mind was reeling. The implications were staggering. Was it possible that this city, this world, held the key to time travel? And if so, why had he been chosen to be a part of it? The more Jonathan learned, the more he realized that his journey was only just beginning. Nimro was not a city like any other, it was a place of hidden power, steeped in ancient knowledge. But there were forces at work within the city that threatened its existence. A dark power, something older than time itself, was awakening, and it was up to Jonathan to stop it. Days passed, and Jonathan's understanding of Nimro deepened. He learned about the city's rulers, its secrets, and the delicate balance of time that governed its existence. He encountered strange artifacts, met wise elders, and even witnessed events from the past unfold before his eyes. It was as though the fabric of time itself had unraveled, revealing glimpses of history long forgotten. But with each revelation came new questions, and with every step he took deeper into the heart of Nimro, the stakes grew higher. Jonathan realized that he was no longer just an observer in this ancient world, he was a participant in a far greater plan, one that spanned the very essence of time. One night, as Jonathan stood at the edge of the city's towering walls, looking out over the dark expanse beyond, Zephar joined him. "It is time," Zephar said quietly. "You have learned enough. The final piece of the puzzle lies before you." Jonathan turned to him, confusion still clouding his thoughts. "What do you mean? What final piece?" "You must stop the awakening," Zephar said, his voice serious. "The dark force is near. If it is allowed to awaken fully, time itself will collapse. All that you know will cease to exist." Jonathan nodded slowly, a sense of determination settling over him. He had been thrust into this world for a reason, and it was time to fulfill his role. With the weight of the future on his shoulders, Jonathan set off to face the unknown, ready to confront whatever awaited him at the heart of Nimro. In the end, it wasn't just about time travel. It was about the choices we make, the paths we follow, and the strength to fight for a future we can't yet fully understand. Jonathan's journey had only just begun, but the fate of time itself rested in his hands.